In this tutorial video, I'm going to be laying out the things you need to know when animating something for the Goo shader. In the first part, I'm going to be walking through the various tools that we have at our disposal for animating things in the Goo shader. In the second part, I'm going to be walking through the process of creating a simple animation with toggles and menus that is just going to move this animation slider for us right here, as well as an animation that uses animation renaming to make sure that materials on the same mesh renderer animate differently. The first and the most important thing that you have to know when animating things for the Goo material is that locked materials cannot have their values changed at all. As you can see, I can't change anything at all, nothing, no textures can't be changed, anything. I can interact with stuff, but I can't change anything at all. Now, how do we work around this for animation clips? Because animation clips aren't going to be able to change things at all. And no, you shouldn't keep your materials unlocked. It's very, very important for performance reasons to keep your materials locked, no matter what platform you're deploying this for. So, how do we work around this for animation clips? Well, we need to set the material as animated using this little play button right here. When this is turned on, the material will know that this property needs to be able to be changed when the material is locked. So, if we lock the body here, we can see that we can still change the slider around and move it around. That's great. That's exactly what we want. Now, animation clips are going to be able to change this value even if the material is locked. Some properties just technically cannot be animated due to technical limitations of the shader. If you see this little icon to the right of a property, that means it can be animated, and if you don't, then it cannot. The next tool that we have at our disposal is property renaming. And a property can be marked as renamed by clicking this little R button right here. You'll see that a rename suffix appears, and this is pretty much the string of characters that will be added to the end of that property name to make it unique from others. You can change this to whatever you like. Of course, there are some limitations in what characters you can use, so please only use alphabetical, English, lowercase, and uppercase characters. Setting this field to blank will create a new random string of letters. Why do we need property renaming? The way that animation clips work in Unity is that they change the property that you're changing on every material on the renderer. They're animating the render itself, not the material that you think you're animating. So if I were to animate this animation slider on the body skin mesh renderer, every single one of these materials is going to have that animation slider animated in the exact same way. And that is sometimes not what you want in cases where, for example, you want to animate the body and the fluff animation sliders independently, but you still want both of them to be animated. We're going to have a tutorial on how to do this later on in the video, so stick around. Rename properties are only going to be renamed when the material has been locked. Right now, this property has not been renamed at all. It's only prepared to be renamed. We have everything set up so that it will be renamed when the material is locked. So if we were to animate this right now, this will be animating the default normal parameter, not the renamed one. But as soon as we lock the material, now this material has become the renamed variant of it. And now we can animate this, and it'll be separate from other properties of the same name, because now it has the suffix to it. If you need to get the name of the parameter, you can right-click on the label of that parameter and select one of these names. Copy property name will give you the normal property name of that property. In this case, it'll just be tf time. And if we choose to copy the rename property name, it'll give us the property name with the suffix. Now you can use these in stuff like VRC Fury. Like for example, if you're using something like a toggle with the material property, you can just plug this into here along with your thing. And this will now control this value here. Now beware that the same properties that share the same rename suffix will pretty much act as the same property on that mesh renderer, right? So if we have the body here and the fluff using the same rename suffix, if we were to animate the body slider here, the fluff slider will also move with it. This is what's going to happen in this case. Because under the hood, these are both this property, right? Now, if they're both renamed, right, but we have the fluff has a different rename suffix, right? Now the body is going to be animating differently from the fluff. because now under the hood, this is a whole different property, right? But if we were to have, like, say, for example, this color, blur, animated and renamed, these two won't animate in the same way because under the hood, they're different properties. This is right here. This is the animation slider property now. And this is the blur property slider. As you can see, they're different properties. They're different strings. So they won't animate the same. Okay, now let's create a simple animation clip that moves the animation slider for all of these 4 materials on this avatar here from 0 to 1 as a toggle. So we're going to have the off state be this. And then when the user turns on a toggle in their radial menu, the avatar will slowly transition into this. All right, first things first, we're going to need to find the animator FX. So the FX controller. And the way we can do that is by going to our avatar root object right here, scrolling down, finding this playable layers tab, expanding it, and clicking on this FX controller, and it'll highlight it. Double click on it, and you'll find this animator tab that shows up. I'm going to drag this out into the bottom here, and just dock it right there. Next thing that we'll need is the animation window. You can find that in window, animation, animation. A lot of animation. Drag that in there, we'll need that. Now, next thing, let's take the FX controller and drag that into the avatar root object, right there. Awesome, now we can start animating things. Let's enter into play mode. Now our avatar is gonna be all weird and stuff like this, but that's perfectly fine. We're gonna be doing this in play mode to help save us some headaches later where the avatar kind of goes into the state permanently and we have to somehow reset that. If we just did this in play mode, we save ourselves all those headaches and everything's gonna be perfectly fine. Now let's create an animation clip. Select our avatar root object, go into the animation tab, find this little drop down. It's gonna say something else for you, but just find it. Click on it, create new clip. Find a folder to put this animation into, and then name it Goo Off, or whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. It's just for your own, the name is just so you remember what it is. And now that we have our animation clip, let's set this little red icon. Let's click on it. Let's set it to red. And by clicking this, we're going into recording mode. So anything that we change on the avatar is going to be recorded into this animation clip. And what we want to change here is the TF slider. So we're going to select our body here, or select the meshes that have the goo materials that we want to animate. So in my case, it's going to be the body, and we're going to find one of the goo materials. So I'm going to select the body material here and find the thing that we want to animate. So it's going to be this right here. I'm just going to slide that to 0. If it's already 0 for you, just move it around and set it back to 0. So you can see that it's animated the body, but it's not animated the, it hasn't animated the wings or the hair. So we're going to do those as well. Set the hair to that. The wings that as well. And please make sure that you're not just selecting the materials here. If you just select the materials here and animate them, nothing will work. This will not be recording anything. You have to go into your hierarchy and select the object and find the material on that object that you want to animate. That is very important. Now, once you have this off animation, we're going to do the same thing, but for the on animation. So let's create a new clip, call it Goo On. Press the record button and set the animation slider to 1. This is going to be the end state of the animation, what we're going to be arriving at. So let's do it on the hair, let's do it on the fluff, and the wings. Awesome. Okay. Now we could exit play mode and set up our animators. Let's go into the animator tab, go into the base layer, make sure you're in layers, go into the base layer, and remove the Goo On and Goo Off. Now, let's click the plus here to create a new layer, call it Goo. The name, again, doesn't matter, whatever you need to remember it. Click on the little cog wheel off the Goo layer, set the weight to 1. Now let's find our animation clips, select both of them, and drag them in. Now, my entry immediately points to Goo Off. If yours doesn't do this, right-click on Goo Off and set as layer default state. I don't need to do this because it's already set as default state. So this is what we want. Now, right-click on Goo Off, make transition, click on Goo On. Goo On, make transition, Goo Off. We've made transitions between off, on, and on, off. Now we need to add a parameter that will control this transition. So let's go into the parameters tab here. Click the little plus right here. Select the Boolean and name this Goo. So the name of this can be anything as long as it'll match the name of the parameter that you're going to be adding to your parameters list on the avatar. So just keep this name in mind, but you can name it anything you want as long as it doesn't collide with something that already exists. So we have our goo toggle now. Let's select the goo off to on transition right here. Go into our inspector tab, expand the settings, set the exit time to 0, uncheck has exit time, and in the list of conditions, click the little plus and set this dropdown to goo. Make sure this is true. So now goo off will transition into goo on whenever goo is true. And now for goo on to off, we're going to do the same thing. Exit time to 0, has exit time off. List of conditions, add a new one, set this to goo, and now set this to false, meaning that whenever goo is off, the goo on transition will go into goo off. Okay, so now in the transitions here, we can control the speed of the animation using this transition duration right here. I'm going to set this to 5 seconds here. And now we can go ahead into play mode and preview our animation. So go into scene view, select the avatar root object, and click the goo parameter to true. And voila, that's our animation. Uncheck this. And once these animations are done, it will go back into goo off. There you go. And now let's do a little experiment. Let's set the fluff, hair, and wings to not have their animation slider be animated, and then lock them. Now let's have the body set to animated, and lock the body. Go into play mode, and let's see what happens now with the animation. As you can see, the hair, the wings, and the fluff are now all gooey. The goo off doesn't control it anymore. It doesn't change the parameter. So again, it's locked. We can't change. It's impossible for it to be changed, right? And if we play the animation, the body is animating, but nothing else is, right? And if we turn off the animation, the body is going to go back to normal as it was before, right? But everything else is just static. It's not moving, right? And this is the importance of making sure that your properties are set to be animated, because otherwise your animations just aren't going to work no matter how hard you try to get. Now let's add the parameter and menu. So the way you do this is you first off need to find the menu and parameters of your avatar here, which are on the expressions tab in your avatar root object. I'm going to start with the parameters, so I can click on the parameters. It'll ping me the parameters. I'm going to click on it, press add, then add the goo parameter, set the type to Boolean, and set the default to off, because I want the avatar to not be gooey by default. Saved just means that the value that you changed it to in-game via the radial menu is going to be saved across avatar switches and world switches, right? So if you want your state of whether or not you're gooey to be saved across world hopping, then set this to true, but I want this to be false because I always want the avatar to not be gooey at spawn. Synced means that the parameter is going to be synced to other users. If you want this parameter to only be on your end and other users won't be able to see the changes in it, then uncheck this. You also won't be using your memory if you uncheck this. Okay, that's the parameters. Now let's find the menu. So same way. Let's scroll down. Menu. Okay, we got the menu now. Let's add a control. Call it goo. Type. Toggle. Parameter. Goo. That's it. You now have a goo toggle. And you can use this in game now. Okay, now what if we want the fluff to animate independently from the body? Let's say we want a toggle for just the fluff to be gooey, right? Have this be separate and independent from the body goo toggle, right? So we can go into something like this while still keeping the hair and the fluff normal. How do we do that? This is where renamed properties are going to come in. And I'm going to show you what happens if we don't use animated properties. So I'm going to very quickly throw together an animation. Okay, so we have our goo hair animation here. And if I turn it on, you'll see that the body is animating as well. That's not what we want, right? And if we take a look at the animation clip here, we'll see that the goo hair off is animating the hair, but it's also animating the body skin mesh renderer material TF time. Now, what this means is that every single TF time property on the body skin mesh renderer is going to be set to this value. Same goes for goo hair on, right? Every single one of these is going to have that property set and animated. Now, this is not what we want. We don't want the body to also be animated. We want just the fluff to be animated, right? So this is where renamed properties come in, because what we're going to do here is we're going to select the fluff, go into the animation right here that we want to animate, and press this R button to set it to animated. It'll give the animation a random suffix. And then to actually have this animation rename work, we have to lock the shader because right now, if we don't lock it, as you can see, it's still the same result. So first off, we need to lock the shader, right? And now, as you can see, something's already changed. The hair isn't animating, the body is. That's because we're still animating this TF time property on the body, right? So now what we need to do is we need to re-record this animation clip with this slider changed on the fluff material specifically, right? And we need to remove the old TF time animation. So I'm going to go on my goo hair off and remove, well, first of all, I'm actually going to animate the fluff, right? So this is the fluff material. And as you can see, it's TF time with this little extra string here of text. That's the rename, right? I'm just going to set that to 0 and rename the old property. Go to goo hair on, animate this to 1. All right, there's some like weird things going on where we actually can't move this because this animation is currently playing. So I'm just gonna jump out of play mode and jump back in. Cool. There we go. Now we'll also remove that on the goo on. And set that to 1. There we go. Okay. Goo off, goo on. Awesome. And now if we toggle between the two, well, there's some jank with animator stuff, so it's not best to preview this when we've animated it. It's best to start afresh with the new play mode, kind of restart the play mode, and then look at our new animation. And as you can see, the goo material is animating independently from the body material. Just like that. That's exactly what we wanted. Now keep in mind this animation rename, this property rename is only going to work while this material is locked. So if we all of a sudden unlock the fluff, as you can see, now the fluff is going to be animating with the body because the rename is no longer there, right? But once the rename is there, you know, we have this independent control. And that's it for animating things on the goo material. If you have more questions, take a look at the manual here as you might find more answers here. On top of that, we have a Discord server which you can visit to ask me any questions you have about the shader. Have fun.